There is a specific frequency to silence in a place where people are waiting to die. It is a low, humming vibration that sits right at the edge of hearing, somewhere between the rattle of an air conditioner and the final exhale of a forgotten soul. I lay in the sterile, air-conditioned purgatory of room 304 at Golden Oak Manor, listening to that silence. To the families who drop off their unwanted elders here, this place bills itself as a luxury retirement community. But I know the truth. I hear the truth. It feels less like a home and more like a departure lounge for the morgue, smelling faintly of industrial lavender cleaner, masking the underlying stench of decay and bleach. I am Thomas. I am 83 years old. For 40 years, I was an audio engineer. I mastered the acoustics of concert halls in Vienna and recording studios in Nashville. I could tell you the difference between a Stradivarius and a factory violin just by the way the sound waves hit the back wall. My world was built on precision, on clarity, on the beautiful truth of sound. Now, my world has shrunk to a 12 by 12 room with beige walls and a window that only opens 3 inches. I am legally blind in my left eye, the result of a detached retina that was deemed too risky to operate on at my age. My legs are weak, betraying me after a stroke 2 years ago that left me dependent on a cane and the pity of strangers. But my hearing is my livelihood. It is my gift. It is the one thing age hasn't stolen from me. And what I hear in this place when the lights go out is terrifying. "Dad, stop picking at the blanket." David's voice cut through my memory. I blinked, shifting my gaze to the empty chair by the window. David wasn't there today. He hadn't been there in 3 weeks, but his voice was always in my head, scolding, managing, diminishing. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike on the gravel driveway of our old home, the man whose failed business debts I quietly paid off 3 times, dipping into my retirement savings without telling his mother because I didn't want him to feel ashamed. He and his wife, Jessica, were the ones who put me here. They were the ones who sat me down at the kitchen table 6 months ago, their faces arranged in masks of practiced concern. "The house is just too much for you, Dad," Jessica had said, patting my hand with fingers that felt cold. "The stairs, the yard, it's dangerous. Martha." They used Martha against me, my wife.
The woman who had painted that house yellow because she said it looked like sunshine, even in the rain. She had been gone for 5 years, and they used her memory as a bludgeon to force me out of the home we built. "We found a place, Dad," David had said, avoiding my eyes. "Golden Oak, it's paradise. They have activities, they have a garden. We'll visit every Sunday." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I signed the papers. I let them sell the yellow house. I let them liquidate the furniture. And now I was here. And David was gone. When they did come, which was rare, they talked loudly and slowly, articulating every syllable as if the stroke had taken my intelligence along with my mobility. They didn't know that when they stepped into the hallway to take a call, I could hear them. I could hear Jessica asking how long the trust fund would last if I lived to be 90. But the neglect was bearable. The loneliness was a cold companion I had grown used to. What was unbearable was Brenda. The door to my room clicked open. I didn't need to see the clock to know it was 7 p.m. The shift change. "Time for meds, Thomas," a voice chimed. Brenda. To the families visiting on weekends, Brenda was a saint. She wore scrubs with cartoon bears on them. She had a soft, lilting voice that sounded like syrup. "Oh, he's just a sweetheart," she would tell David. But to us, the residents of the memory care wing, Brenda was a nightmare. She walked to the side of the bed. I smelled her before I felt her. Stale cigarette smoke masked by cheap peppermint gum. "Sit up," she ordered. The syrup was gone. Her voice was flat, hard, efficient. I struggled to push myself up on my elbows. My stroke-weakened muscles protested. I wasn't moving fast enough for her. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were like iron bands. She yanked me forward, not helping but hauling. "Ow," I gasped. "Brenda, please." "Don't be a baby," she hissed. She shoved a paper cup into my hand, 2 pills, and a plastic cup of water that was half empty. "I need more water," I rasped. "You get what you get," she said. "You rang the bell 3 times last night, Thomas. You want to pee all night?" She watched me swallow the pills. Then she pushed me back down onto the mattress. Hard. My head bounced against the thin pillow. "Lights out," she said. She walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. The hallway light caught her silhouette.
"If you ring that bell tonight," she whispered, "I'll wheel you into the supply closet and leave you there until morning." The door slammed shut. I lay there in the dark, rubbing my wrist. It was throbbing. I knew by morning there would be a bruise, just like the one last week. I remembered showing David that bruise. It was the last time he visited. "Look," I had said, pulling up my sleeve. "She did this, Brenda." David had looked at the purple mark on my fragile, papery skin. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Brenda, who was standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Mr. Vance," Brenda had said, her voice trembling. "I tried to catch him. He fell out of bed. I grabbed his arm to save him from hitting the floor." David looked at me. He looked at the saint in the teddy bear scrubs. "Dad," David sighed, the exhaustion plain in his voice, "you have to be more careful. You're falling again? Brenda is doing her best. You need to stop making up stories." "I didn't fall," I whispered. "Please, David." "I have to go, Dad," he said. Checking his Rolex, a watch bought with the proceeds from my house. "I have a meeting. Just..." I lay there, gripping the cold metal rails of the bed, listening to my own son apologize to the woman who was tormenting me. He looked at my bruise and chose to believe the lie because it was easier than facing the truth. If you've ever realized that the people who are supposed to protect you are actually waiting for you to die so they can cash out, hit that subscribe button. Because I decided then and there that I wasn't going to die in the dark. I was going to turn the lights on. I wasn't helpless. My body was broken, yes. My eyes were dim. But my mind was a steel trap, and my ears were the finest instruments in the building. I waited for the morning. When the sun finally dragged itself through the blinds, the day shift arrived. The atmosphere changed. The cruelty of the night retreated into the shadows. At 10 a.m., Maria came in. Maria was the cleaning lady. She was the only person in this building who touched my hand without gloves. She hummed while she mopped. "Buenos dias, Mr. Thomas," she sang, wringing out her mop. "Good morning, Maria," I said. I was sitting in my wheelchair by the window, where the night nurse had dumped me earlier. "Maria," I said, "can you do me a favor? That ficus plant in the corner. It's so dusty. Could you take it to the bathroom and rinse the leaves in the shower?" Maria looked at the large artificial tree. It was a monstrosity of plastic and dust, sitting in a heavy ceramic pot filled with fake moss. "Of course, Mr. Thomas," she smiled. She dragged the heavy pot into the bathroom. She turned on the shower. This was my window. I reached into the bag hanging on the back of my wheelchair. It was an old canvas messenger bag, tattered and stained with ink. He had tried to throw it out when they moved me, but I had screamed so loudly he let me keep it just to shut me up. He thought it contained old crossword puzzles and hard candies. He was wrong. I unzipped the inner pocket. My hand wrapped around the cold, smooth plastic of the device. It was a Sony high-fidelity baby monitor, but not just any monitor. This was a unit I had modified myself years ago to test soundproofing in nursery builds. It had a remote SD recording function, an extended battery life, and a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a heartbeat from across the room. I wheeled myself over to the spot where the plant usually stood. I had seconds. I pulled the bag of spare moss I had hoarded from the craft activity last week out of my pocket. Maria turned off the water in the bathroom. She called out. I shouted back. She dragged the plant back into the room. She placed it exactly where I wanted it, 3 feet from the foot of my bed. "Looks beautiful," she said, wiping her hands. "Maria," I said, pointing to the bathroom. She frowned, turning back. She went back into the bathroom. I moved. I leaned forward, fighting the dizziness that always swirled in my head when I moved too fast. I reached into the pot. I dug my fingers into the fake moss at the base of the plastic trunk. I nestled the black box deep into the greenery. I covered it with the spare moss. I angled the microphone port upward, aimed directly at the space between the bed and the door. It was invisible. It was perfect. Maria came back out. "Mirror is clean, Mr. Thomas. My eyes aren't what they used to be," I smiled. She left. I sat back in my chair. My heart was racing. The red light on the recorder was taped over with black electrical tape, but I knew it was running. It had 48 hours of battery life. Now, I just had to wait for the vampires to come out. The day passed in a blur of lukewarm soup and bingo numbers I couldn't see. Night fell. The facility went quiet. The shift changed. I heard Brenda's heavy tread in the hallway.
I heard her laughing with the other aide at the station. I got into bed. I pulled the covers up to my chin. I lay perfectly still. I focused on my breathing. In. Out. Deep. Rattle. It was a performance I had perfected over the last month. The deep, rhythmic breathing of the heavily sedated. The sleep of the dying. 1 a.m. passed. The HVAC system hummed. 2 a.m. The door handle turned. It was slow. Quiet. I didn't move. I kept my breathing steady. The door opened. Footsteps. Rubber soles on linoleum. Brenda. But she wasn't alone. There was a second set of footsteps. Heavier. The click of dress shoes. A man. I strained my ears. I knew the cadence of every staff member's walk. This wasn't a nurse. This wasn't the janitor. Henderson whispered. I froze. My blood turned to ice in my veins. I recognized that voice. It was Mr. Henderson, the facility administrator. The man who wore 3-piece suits and smiled like a shark when he gave tours to the families. "Yeah," Brenda whispered back. "He's out cold." I hadn't eaten the pudding. I had flushed it. But I didn't twitch. They walked to the foot of my bed. I could feel them standing there, looming over me in the darkness. "Weak?" Henderson asked. "Weak," Brenda said. "But he's stubborn." The sun called again. Henderson whispered. My breath hitched in my throat. I forced myself to exhale slowly, fighting the urge to gasp. Brenda asked. "Yeah," Henderson said. "He's getting impatient. He said the monthly fees are eating into the inheritance. He's behind on his payments to us, Brenda. And if he stops paying, we have to evict." "I'm doing everything I can," Brenda replied. Her voice was devoid of humanity. It was the voice of a butcher discussing a cut of meat. "I've cut his hydration by half. He's been dry for 2 days. And I swapped his hard meds for sugar pills 3 days ago." The words hit me like physical blows. Cut hydration. Sugar pills. They weren't just neglecting me. They were killing me. "He needs to go this week," Henderson said. "Ideally, we need a cardiac event by the weekend." "He's resilient," Brenda complained. "Push it," Henderson said. I heard him move towards the window. "Open the window tonight," Henderson ordered. "It's 10 degrees outside. Let the cold air do the work. Pneumonia is a classic closer." Brenda asked,
"Just do it," Henderson snapped. "And leave the door cracked so the heat escapes. By morning he'll be rattling." Slide. Click. Whoosh. The window slid open.
The sound was followed instantly by the rush of freezing winter air. It hit my face like a slap. It bit into my exposed skin. "Let's go," Henderson said. They walked out. The door clicked shut, but didn't latch. I lay there in the dark. The cold air washed over me, a tidal wave of frost. I started to shiver. It wasn't just the cold. It was the horror. I replayed the conversation in my head. The son called again. He's getting impatient. My son, David. He wasn't just negligent. He wasn't just busy. He was the client. They were the hitmen. He was paying them to accelerate my death because I was costing him too much money. He was killing his own father to protect an inheritance that didn't even exist anymore because he had gambled it away. The bile rose in my throat, hot, acidic, uncontrollable. I turned my head to the side. I vomited on the floor. The sound echoed in the freezing room, a wet, violent retching that tore at my throat. I gasped for air, freezing air that burned my lungs. I lay there, shivering violently, tears leaking from my good eye, mixing with the vomit on my chin. But as I lay there, freezing, shaking, broken, a thought cut through the panic. The ficus plant. The red light was taped over, but the battery was full. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just a dying old man in a cold room. I was a witness, and I had the tape. Survival is not a roar. It is a stubborn refusal to stop breathing when the world has decided you are already dead. I woke to a light that was the color of dirty dishwater, filtering through the blinds that had been left open to ensure my demise. The room was a meat locker. The air was so cold it felt solid, a physical weight pressing down on my chest, freezing the moisture in my lungs. I was shivering, a violent, rattling tremor that shook the bedframe, but beneath the blankets I had pulled up to my chin, my skin was on fire. The fever had arrived. It was the body's frantic attempt to burn out the cold, a biological war being fought in the marrow of my bones. I turned my head. The vomit on the linoleum floor had dried into a crusty, vile map of my misery. It smelled of bile and helplessness. I lay there, watching the door, waiting. I knew Brenda wouldn't come back until tonight. The day shift started at 7. At 7:05 a.m., the door opened. It wasn't Brenda. It was Sarah. Sarah was 22, a single mother with dark circles under her eyes, and a heart that hadn't yet been hardened by the industry of dying. She hummed when she worked. She showed me pictures of her toddler, Leo. She walked in with a tray of breakfast. She stopped dead 3 feet inside the room. "Oh my God," she whispered. The tray clattered onto the bedside table. "Mister," she rushed to the window, slamming it shut. "Why is the window open?" She turned back to me, her eyes wide with horror as she took in the scene. The vomit, the shaking, the blue tint to my lips. I called for help," I rasped. My voice sounded like grinding stones. She put a hand on my forehead. Her palm was cool against my burning skin. "You're burning up," she gasped. "I need to get the doctor." She started to turn away. "No," I croaked. I reached out a hand that trembled violently and grabbed her wrist. My grip was weak, but the desperation gave it weight. "Mr. Thomas, I have to—" "Sarah, look at me," I commanded. I forced my good eye to lock onto hers. "Listen to me." She stopped. She looked at the door, then back at me. She saw something in my face that scared her, not madness, but a terrifying clarity. "In the plant," I whispered, gesturing weakly to the ficus in the corner. "The ficus? Tick in the moss," she asked, confused. "Get it," I hissed. "Hide it in your pocket.
Do not let anyone see, especially Anderson. Mister, they tried to kill me last night, Sarah, I said. The words hung in the cold air. They opened the window. They swapped my meds. I have it recorded. Please. The mention of her son did it. She looked at the door. She looked at the vomit on the floor. She realized this wasn't an accident. She moved. She went to the plant. She dug her fingers into the fake moss. She pulled out the black Sony monitor. The red light was still blinking under the tape. She stared at it, then shoved it deep into the pocket of her scrubs. I fumbled with the hem of my blanket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper I had kept hidden in my pajama pocket for weeks. Call this number, I whispered, pressing it into her hand. Saul Berkowitz. Tell him Thomas has the master tape. Sarah took the paper. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I'll call him. She squeezed my hand. Then she ran to the nurse's station, not just to get the doctor, but to make the call that would save my life. Saul arrived 3 hours later. Saul Berkowitz is 79 years old, walks with a cane carved from blackthorn, and wears suits that cost more than the annual budget of this facility.
In the 90s, they called him the Hammer because he didn't just win cases, he demolished the opposition until there was nothing left but dust. He had retired 5 years ago, but retirement for Saul just meant he argued with the television instead of judges. He stormed past the front desk like a hurricane in a fedora. I could hear him from down the hall. Saul, his voice boomed. He burst into my room. Sarah was there, changing my IV. She looked terrified but relieved. Saul took one look at me, the IV line, the oxygen cannula in my nose, the pallor of my skin, and his face turned to granite. Out, he said to the room in general. Sarah looked at me. I nodded. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the SD card she had removed from the monitor, and placed it in Saul's hand. Then she slipped out and closed the door. Saul didn't say hello. He pulled a chair up to the bed. He took out his laptop. He inserted the card. Talk to me, Tommy, he said softly. Play the file from 2 a.m., I whispered. He clicked the file. The sound filled the room. The quality was pristine. The silence, the door opening, the footsteps. Henderson's voice. The son called again. He's getting impatient. Saul stiffened. His hand gripped the edge of the desk. Brenda's voice. I've cut his hydration by half, and I swapped his hard meds. Saul's face went from granite to crimson. His breathing became heavy. Henderson. Push it. Open the window tonight. Then the sound of the window sliding open. The wind. Saul slammed the laptop shut. He didn't cry. Saul doesn't cry. He growled. It was a low, animal sound of pure, unadulterated rage. We have them, he said, his voice trembling, not with fear, but with the effort to control his violence. We have them all, Tommy. Conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse. David, I said. It was the only name that mattered. He's the client, Saul sped. He ordered the hit. I will bury him, Thomas. Sunday, I said. He is coming Sunday for the family meeting to discuss my end-of-life care. Saul looked at me. He understood. I didn't just want them arrested. I wanted them exposed. I wanted to see their faces when the mask fell. Saul asked, looking at my monitors. I'm not going anywhere, I said, a fire lighting in my chest that had nothing to do with the fever. Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m., the family meeting was held in the facility's private conference room on the first floor.
It was a sterile space designed to intimidate, with a long mahogany table, plush leather chairs, and a sideboard with cold coffee. They were all there. David sat at the head of the table. He was wearing a dark sweater, looking somber, checking his phone every 30 seconds. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, sat next to him, wearing large sunglasses indoors, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Mr. Henderson sat opposite them, a file folder open in front of him, looking every inch the concerned professional. Brenda stood by the door, arms crossed, wearing her caring nurse mask. The door opened. Saul wheeled me in. I was wrapped in 3 blankets. I had an oxygen tank hooked to the back of the chair. I slumped to the side, letting my head loll, drool glistening at the corner of my mouth. I looked like a man on death's door. Saul parked me at the end of the table. He sat down next to me, placing his briefcase on the mahogany surface with a heavy thud. Thank you for coming, Henderson began, his voice oily. We know this is a difficult time. As we discussed on the phone, David, your father's decline has been... It's heartbreaking, Jessica murmured. The cold snap really affected his lungs, Brenda added, shaking her head sadly. We tried to keep him warm, but his immune system is just... David sighed. He looked at me. He didn't see his father. He saw a ledger entry that refused to balance. Look, Dad, David started, using that loud, slow, condescending tone he reserved for idiots and children. We just think, given your decline, maybe it's time to look at palliative care. Less intervention, no more IVs, more... It's the humane thing to do, Henderson nodded. We just want you to be peaceful, Thomas, Jessica said, reaching out to touch my arm. I pulled my arm back. I lifted my head. I looked straight at David. My eyes were clear. The drool was gone. The slump vanished. Where? I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. David blinked. Where? I repeated. The room went still. Brenda stiffened by the door. Her arms dropped to her sides. Henderson's eyes darted to Brenda, then back to me. A flicker of panic crossed his smooth face. You're confused, David laughed nervously. I'm not confused, David, I said. I turned to Saul. Saul? Saul smiled. It was a wolf smile. He opened his laptop. He connected it to the room's Bluetooth speaker system that Henderson used for presentations. He pressed the spacebar.
The audio filled the room. It was crystal clear. My audio engineering background ensured that every syllable was sharp, every whisper amplified. Brenda's voice boomed from the speakers. I've cut his hydration by half, and I swapped his heart meds for sugar pills 3 days ago. Jessica gasped. She covered her mouth with her hands. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose. David's face went the color of ash. He stared at the speaker as if it were a ghost. Henderson's voice. The son called again. He's getting impatient. Henderson. Push it. Open the window tonight. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that has just detonated, the millisecond before the shockwave tears the building apart. David stood up, knocking his chair over backward. It clattered loudly on the floor. This, he screamed, pointing at the laptop. This is AI. He's crazy. It is time-stamped, Saul said calmly, closing the laptop with a snap. It is digitally watermarked. It is admissible in a court of law. Henderson choked. He stood up and bolted for the door. He didn't make it. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the room, blocking his path. Behind them was Detective Miller. Mr. Henderson, the detective said. Henderson collapsed back into his chair. Brenda began to cry, a high, wailing sound. She pointed a shaking finger at Henderson. She shrieked. I have texts. He threatened to fire me. He said the family wanted a gun. David yelled at her. Brenda, screamed back. The betrayers turned on each other. It was ugly. It was vicious. And it was glorious. Jessica was sobbing now, crying about how she didn't know, how she thought they were just talking about hospices. No one was listening to her. I didn't look at the police. I didn't look at Henderson or Brenda. I looked at my son. He was standing there, shaking. He wasn't looking at the officers. He was looking at me. He looked terrified. Not sorry, just terrified of the consequences. What happened? I asked softly. The room quieted enough for him to hear me. What do you know? David's shoulders slumped. The arrogance evaporated, leaving only a pathetic, broken man. We have Dad, he whispered, the truth finally slipping out like blood from a wound. Gambling, crypto, we leveraged everything. We lost it all. The sharks, they're coming for the house. We needed the trust fund to vest. I looked at him. My son. The boy I taught to fish. The man who was willing to freeze his father to death to pay a bookie. You lost more than money, I said. The detective stepped forward. David Vance. They handcuffed him. They handcuffed Henderson. They handcuffed Brenda. They led them away, in a procession of shame. I sat in the wheelchair, watching them go.
I watched my son being led out, his head bowed, his wrists bound. I felt a deep, aching sadness for the boy I raised. I mourned him, as if he had died years ago. But as the door closed behind them, leaving me alone in the room with Saul, I felt something else. I felt a profound peace for the man I had survived.